Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me all the way back there? All right. So I am so grateful to be here. My name is Sarah Lomax Reese, and I'm the president and general manager of 900 AM WURD, which is the only Black Talk radio station in Pennsylvania. Whoa. And one of the few in the country that are left. So we decided to do a trip, our first station trip, and we called it Embracing Our Culture Coast to Coast. And basically, we decided we would take our folks from Philly and bring them to the West Coast, to a historic Black city like Oakland, and really celebrate our commonalities, our culture, our community. And it's been phenomenal. We got here on Thursday, and we've been just absorbing and eating up the history and culture of Oakland. And tonight is kind of the pinnacle of our Embracing Our Culture Coast to Coast trip. And I really, Sonia Sanchez is our adopted Philadelphia native. She's originally from Birmingham, born in Birmingham, but was raised in New York, correct? Mm-hmm. But she's been living in Philly for
30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
So we claim her completely. She is the poet laureate of Philadelphia. We love her dearly. She is really the reason that this event came to pass, because she reached out to her friend, Angela Davis, and vouched for us, for Word and for me, and said, look, they're worthy of your time, you know. Let's do this. And she brought herself all the way out here to the West Coast to participate in this amazing event. So thank you, Sister Sonia Sanchez.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
And I met Angela Davis very briefly when she was in Philly last year with Sonia Sanchez. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful that you decided to spend your time with us and to share your history and your knowledge and your wisdom, like Sonia, with our group from Philadelphia. And obviously we have a bunch of folks who are local to California who are joining us today as well. So we are just grateful. I'm very excited to be able to kind of steer the beginning of the conversation before it's opened up to the community to ask questions. And I know our community in Philadelphia are very excited to hear from you as well. So thank you very much.
You do know, Sarah, that we're going to take over the conversation.
Oh, I know that. That's why I got the easiest job in the room. But I'm just going to get it started. I'm just going to like push the ball, you know, down the hill a little bit. So I'm just going to get started. And my first question, in keeping with this theme of coast to coast and embracing our culture coast to coast, obviously you two are here because you represent East Coast, West Coast, and so
we're both from Birmingham.
You're both from Birmingham.
Both from Birmingham.
I know.
And you probably want to ask the question: what kind of water was in Birmingham to produce some of us?
That's right.
I'm sorry. We'll be good. I'm sorry.
I get the first question. Okay, so the first question is, because I know you're both originally from Birmingham, but let's like just play along, Philly, West Coast. So what about those two cities informed, shaped your lives as activists? And so I just wanted to start that, just in keeping again with the theme of our coast to coast trip. Is there anything about these two historic and iconic Black cities that shaped and informed your lives as activists? Who wants to start? You're shaking your head.
Do you want to start?
That doesn't matter.
Well, of course, Oakland is the city where the Black Panther Party was founded.
Exactly. Yes.
And And in 1966, I was studying in Europe. I had actually left Birmingham, gone to New York for a while, lived in Boston, France, and I ended up in Germany when I discovered that this organization had been founded in the city of Oakland, California. I immediately said to myself, how am I going to get back to the U.S. and to the West Coast and to California? I actually ended up in Southern California. But eventually, of course, I made my way up to Oakland. I settled in Oakland because this is the place where I was in jail. I ended up in Oakland because I was in jail in first Marin County in San Rafael, and then in San Jose, where my trial took place. And after my trial was over, all of my friends and family and comrades had moved to Oakland, so there was nothing left for me to do but to settle in this amazing city, and I've never regretted it for a moment.
Right. I came
Philly?
I came to Philadelphia after a long trek. I was born in Birmingham, such as Angela, and then my dad brought me to a place called New York City, supposedly for freedom. But I think my father came to New York because I think he was running away from Birmingham because he was a school teacher, but also he owned a speakeasy. And on Saturdays, he would let the CP party meet in his place on Saturdays, because Patterson told me about that years later. And I think that at some point he had to leave, and we came to a place called New York City. And I was very much, New Yorkers are very arrogant about New York. Like, I'm from New York. Where are you from? Oh, yeah? And when someone says, is that so? Right, And I thought I would be in New York City all my life, except that I got in the movement. And part of that movement was teaching in a place called New York City. And part of that movement was taking on the educational system in New York City to such a point that that I was, I was an advisor for a third world organization at our school. And the principal really did hate us. I mean, the president hated us because he could do nothing. And what he wanted to do, he had to come through us. So he really didn't like us at all. And what really happened at some point, I was teaching one day, and some of the students decided to sit in the president's office, and he called the police. But he called the police like they called the police down at Howard, to come in and just, And so someone ran to my classroom, and I went over there. And as I got there, the police were coming in, getting ready to hit. And I said, these students all know about nonviolence, and, I'm going to go with them. So I went. The long story is simply that he decided to prosecute them, the president. He couldn't do that with me as a professor. Conrad Lynn was our lawyer there. And he told me, Sonia, they intend to expel these students. So I went in, you think who else is teaching Black Lit at the time? Who else is teaching creative writing? So I figured, they need me, right? And I go in and I said, what do you want? He said, I want you out of the school. So I figured, well, there's so many universities in New York City. I said, if you show good cause, then at this next trial, I will then just resign. And I said, I can go to any of these schools. And we got there the next day. Conrad said, they sent a novice to do this case, and evidently it's okay. And so, but Conrad said, how did that happen? I told him what had happened. And Conrad was very, 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 very astute lawyer. And he said, Sonia, that's dangerous. But I went in and wrote, I resign, right? And then I went and called all my friends in the universities, hey, I'm available for September. And not one person answered. And one of the English professors, leftists, called me and said, "Sonia, your file has been picked up, sent downtown. They will not touch you here." So I had to leave New York City. And as my father said, famous last words, he said, "Sonia, why don't you just teach? That's what you're trained for, and stop talking about all this black stuff." So I went there. I went to a place called Amherst, went to Chicago, it ended up in Philadelphia in 1976, with a big celebration there. And I came to Philadelphia fully with an understanding that it was close to New York and I could get home to my family. But also, I had been in Philadelphia on many occasions, especially at Temple, and there was a student body at Temple that was amazing. Those black students at Temple were just amazing. You walk across the campus, they go, "Yeah, whatever." So I felt what a great deal to come in. And I also came into that place to get a housing. And I came in, and they showed me housing in Chestnut Hill and downtown, all the way downtown and right around UPenn. And I said to the woman, "Don't you have housing where they're working class people and black and white and green and purple people?" And she said, "Yes, but I don't handle that property." And so finally she said, "But I can find someone who," and that's how I got in Germantown. I moved to Germantown, and it has been a wonderful experience because I sit on my porch, every morning in the summertime, and people pass by and stop and say, "Hey, Miss Sanchez," or "Hi, Prof, how you doing?" Or, "What do you think about the weather today?" Or, "What do you think about Mayor Nutter?" or, "What do you think about this and that?" And we have conversations because it's a porch, it's a community, and that's been good. But when Nutter said I was a conscience of the city, I've had hard times in that city because I have spoken out. Make no mistake about it. But I always felt that the people were more important than any of the officials. When MOVE happened in a place called Philadelphia, I was all the way in Ushkush, Georgia, someplace. Got up to give a keynote that morning. And I knew the people weren't listening to me. They were listening, had a question. And the question was Q&A at 10 o'clock. What kind of people live in Philadelphia? Professor Sanchez would drop a bomb on people. And I said, "I'm not speaking for the mayor or the police chief or the fire chief, but I am speaking for the people, the people. We, the people, feel just the way I feel, that it was a terrible thing, an unjust thing, a cowardly thing to do to a people. And we all feel that way. So it's been like wonderful being with we, the people, in a place called Philadelphia. Mm.
So one of the things, and I want to ask this to you, Angela, I was watching your documentary, Free Angela and All Political Prisoners.
It's great, isn't it?
It is phenomenal.
Have you all seen it?
Oh man, it's spectacular. And one of the people who's interviewed said, being a revolutionary, a lot of it was about being young and naive. We didn't fully understand how bloody it could be. And we spent the day today with David Hilliard from the Black Panther Party. And so he was, took us to different places where he showed us where people were gunned down and murdered and killed. And so I wanted to ask you, when you think about all the personal sacrifices that you made and all the risks you took at a very young age, I think you were like 25 when a lot of this was happening. You were on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. You were in jail with the death penalty hanging over you. You just were under incredible stress during that period of your life. And I wanted to know a couple of things. One, how did you survive that kind of intense, hunting, being hunted down? How did you survive that kind of stress? And was it worth it?
Well, first of all, who was it? Who said that?
It was this, I can't remember his name, it was a white guy.
Yeah, it was a white guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's not the way I would describe my experience.
Really?
Not at all. Of course we were young.
Right.
Yes.
And when you're young, of course there's a measure of naivete. But I think that we understood that we were a part of a worldwide revolution. And as a matter of fact, we were persuaded that we were going to create a revolution in this country, and very soon. And of course, there were tragedies, and there was bloodshed, and that was terrible. But that wasn't what the struggle was all about. It was about changing the world. It was about creating a world without racism. It was also about challenging capitalism. And it was also about being in solidarity with the struggles that were happening in other parts of the world. The African liberation struggles, South Africa, of course, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Vietnam. And that was amazing. It was amazing, actually, to feel that one was a part of earth-shaking planetary transformation. And sometimes now, I wonder, how can we retrieve that consciousness at a time when we are urged to think of ourselves primarily as individuals, and when we are urged to focus primarily on how much money we can make.
Exactly.
That was an amazing moment, really amazing. Now, how did I survive being on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list? Well, I had no idea that I would ever be on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, so I didn't prepare for it.
I didn't prepare for that. There's no survival kit for that.
But it's interesting. I went to high school in New York. When I was talking about my trajectory, I said I spent some time in high school in New York. I went to a small school in Greenwich Village, Little Red Schoolhouse. The high school was Elizabeth Irwin High School. There were maybe 28, 29 students in my class, in my grade, in the entire grade. And another one of my classmates was also on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. Yeah, her name is Kathy Boudin, and actually we're still very good friends. We do a lot of work together. She ended up spending over 25 years behind bars. And she is a professor at Columbia now and does work especially to bring attention to people who are in prison for long periods of time, long-termers, because they are the ones who are forgotten. My co-defendant, Rochelle McGee, for example, has been in prison for over 50 years. Yes. So I had no idea that I would ever be on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. I didn't prepare for it, but I knew that that I had to find the strength to stand up to that repression. And I also knew that it wasn't about me. I guess that's where I found the strength. I knew that it really was not about me as an individual. It wasn't about anything I had ever done. It was, I happened to be in the wrong place or the right place at the wrong time or the right time. I don't know. It's interesting. I just spoke at UCLA. I'm teaching at UCLA right now I'm teaching graduate students for 1 quarter. And I had given my first lecture at UCLA because I was fired before I actually had the opportunity to teach for the first time. And I gave the first lecture in this huge hall, Royce Hall. It holds about 2,000 people. And I had not been there since 1969. And so they invited me to give a lecture there. They invited me to give the Regents lecture. I was fired by the Regents in 1969. So I just gave the Regents lecture 2 weeks ago.
How did that feel?
And so it was amazing. It was really there was so many people there, and the chancellor introduced me, and one of my first reaction was, have I done something wrong?
I know.
I'm being officially claimed by UCLA now. But yeah, you realize that it's not about you, that it's about a whole community, and I was saying then, recalling that vast numbers of black women, hundreds, maybe thousands of black women all over this country were stopped and questioned, and many arrested by the cops during that period, and the fact that when I was arrested in New York, and one of the guards told me that she had been arrested. She didn't look anything like me, by the way, but she had been arrested, and they only let her go because she produced her badge. So they were pretending that they thought every black woman was Angela Davis.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that it was a way of attacking
Right.
the community, black communities, political movements, but black women in particular. It was an act of terror. And so when I realized that, I said, well, it's not about me. It's about all of us. And so I felt at every moment in that story that I was not standing alone.
Right.
That I was standing, with my community all over the world. And that gave me strength.
So I want to turn to you, Sonia. You said, and this is a quote from you.
Okay.
This isn't a quote from some guy in a documentary. When asked, why do you write, you answered, because I wanted to tell people how I became this woman with razor blades between her teeth. And
Yeah, I did say that.
you did say that. I saw you say it
Right.
on a video.
Right.
So I want to know from you, how did you become that woman? And if you can talk about it within the context of your role in the Black Arts Movement.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to say, in terms of what happened with you, they brought you back. I was invited 2 years ago to teach again in New York City after all those years.
Full circle.
And I only went to bring it full circle. I went and taught a semester and said no more, but I just had to bring it full circle finally. It is so difficult to answer that question, because I do say that at a very fast pace, but I also understand that it was a slow pace that got me to that. When I first started to write, my dear sister, I wrote poems that probably mentioned the fact that I was a Negro and brown. But with the advent of people like Martin and Malcolm, at some point you had to re-examine yourself on this earth. I was in an organization called New York Core, and we thought we were the baddest things on the planet Earth because we closed down anything that didn't do what it should have done, right? And again, I can still hear my father saying, girl, 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 why don't you just stop this, right? Why don't you just go to work and come home? In fact, why don't you get married and have some babies and move to Long Island? But what I did simply, at that particular time, is that because I was in New York Core, and because I did, when I was in there, the bombing happened in Birmingham, and I wrote one of my first very political poems about that and posted it in the New York Core office at 125th Street. And I went to New York Core returned home to Harlem, and it said it was coming back to Harlem to participate in what was going on with the black community. And Malcolm sent a note saying that anything that happens in Harlem, I have to be a part of. I'm not a revisionist. I said, like everybody else in that Corps office, who does he think he is? He's not a part of New York Corps, whatever. And someone said, he's a racist. We all said, right. And then the first big event we had was the one, if you saw Eyes on the Prize, when he was speaking outside of the hotel, the Teresa Hotel. And I said to everyone, let's go see him. And only 3 people came with me from the New York Corps office. And it was on 7th Avenue and the island. And I'm so tall, so I got up on the island to see him. And I'm sitting there, and he was, just talking. It was a cloudy day. And in New York City, when it's cloudy, it's only then that you see the reds and yellows of buildings. Otherwise, it's dirty, But I was looking at him because it was a cloudy day. You could see the reds and yellows on him, too, if you understand truly what I'm saying. And he finished, and I jumped off. The people from Corps went back to the office. I jumped off the island, and I went through the crowds because I was so short, and went and tapped him on the shoulder. And I said, Mr. X. And he turned around. And before he could say the FOI came, his eyes said, look at her. Whatever. He shook his head, right? He shook his eyes, actually. And he said, yes, my sister. And I said, I don't agree with everything that you said, Mr. X. And he looked at me with those most magnificent, quiet, peaceful eyes. And he says, one day you will, my sister. And he turned and he was off with that FOI. So I went back in to the office and said, Malcolm said, whatever. We work very hard in New York Corps, but we party equally as hard. And at a party on Riverside Drive, I was called the queen of the Palladium when I was in school because my father thought I would never graduate because every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday I was at the Palladium. And I was doing this mad mambo with this brother, and I said, Corps member, and I said, Malcolm said, and I twirled around, I came back, he was gone. And I woke up, I say in a poem, alone with the rising wind of history. I was alone. And all of a sudden, I didn't have a core and a base because I began to talk about what Malcolm said. And I found myself floating around. And at that time, I got a letter from Baraka, at the time Leroy Jones, who called on all the artists, and all the painters and the musicians to come to 130th Street in Harlem. He was going to begin something called the Black Arts Repertory Theater. And we came. I wrote the proposal that was to be given to HARU about having classes for children, bringing them in on Saturdays, having theater outside in the streets. But one significant thing happened there. There were some people that Baraka brought down from the village with him, and they were extremely sexist. And also they thought that we were not, in quotes, true revolutionaries, right? And one day we were upstairs with Barbara Hamilton, who was the wife of the poet Bob Hamilton. We were writing these proposals, and these guys came in, the Patterson brothers, came in with a gun and said, come on downstairs, you're nothing but bougie bees, and we sat down, and they had a gun on there. And I remember sitting there thinking about my grandmother from Alabama. She used to say, you let people do something to you once, you let some people do something to you twice. If you let it happen a third time, it's on you. They did it twice. And I remember leaving out of that building after we had told some people about it, and then we started to meet outside because they were the reason why the fall of that BART happened in a place called New York City. The Patterson brothers, came with completely different ideas. They were going to explain Marxism to us. They were going to explain, revolution to us. And we were like bougie bees, We had these college educations, and, we were this and that and whatever, et cetera. It's a very hard time. But what it made me realize is that this was not going to be an easy motion and movement. To write politically, to think politically. There would be forces brought in that will disrupt. I went to a place called Mexico City to get away. I went to climb the pyramids to clear my head. And when I was walking down El Paseo de la Reforma, some people called out of a bus, Sonia Sanchez. And I kept walking and said, even in Mexico, I said, And they jumped off the bus and said, we've been writing you and calling you to come out to begin Black Studies at a place called San Francisco State. And I said, and people will never let me forget it, I said, anything now called Black will be destroyed. I said, no way am I going to give up a rent control